Yeah, I think it's something that is one that naturally occurs after time, and also um, I think when people start working sometimes with spiritual practices, they kind of separate them a little bit. Oh, I'm doing my spiritual thing now, and then I go to work, and then you can forget about it, and then have an argument with your neighbour or the old work colleague or something like that. And I think being aware. I think number one, um, Bardon's work allows you to become very present. I think, and for me, I think I mentioned this also in a previous video as well, but the working on being present and being aware and conscious of what you're doing, I think from the void meditation is really important and helps you. And then you're in the moment and you're able to interact and um, fully and be present. And I think that really, for me, like I'm thinking back when I was teaching, that was really important. And I was able to sort of observe what I was doing and observe the children and sort of separate myself and see the whole situation rather than being immersed into it. Um, so most definitely, I think that it overflows, and also vice versa. Um, if you have a very demanding job, that can also help you develop skills which you can use in your garden practice. Um, like, for example, with publishing, I have to concentrate a lot for long hours, and I work in silence. And so, with that, it sort of helped me build up my concentration ability as well. So when I meditate, then it's a lot easier for me to enter into the void in some ways because I've been in that environment in most of my day. So it's working because of that silence. So I think kind of also touched on it previously with everyday life and like James mentioned as well. So yeah, for me, I think it has naturally become integrated as I do things. For example, like walking the dog, maybe doing breathing practice. If you're out doing something that it's you can also be in a way of presence, being able to um, influence things or use your abilities to influence your day to in a positive light, or even if to support somebody as well. I think that is also important. So yeah, that's my experience.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and I've found that as I've sought to bring in the practices and infuse them into existing activities, the practice has become a lived action, and that it's funny because then the activity is like, oh, that's that thing that I do every day is how I practice that particular exercise, for example. And yes, wonderful response. Thank you. Okay, Bob, sir, would you like to jump in on this?
Really, just paralleling the thoughts of Tanya and Victoria. For me, common way I use practices when I go for a walk, electric and magnetic lines of force. Maybe I'm doing ball above head. It's rare that I don't incorporate that into something like that. Um, it's if I'm sitting in a meeting in negotiations with others, it's not uncommon. I'll do thought transference with the other individual. So I have a better understanding of what it is they're trying to accomplish or feel or do. So again, just like everybody's been pointing out here, the ability to practice ad hoc is only limited by your creativity.
Hmm.
Just make sure that whatever you're doing isn't running counter to the primary activity you're trying to work on. This is pretty much it. And I think that kind of parallels what Bardon was going on about, where he's like, okay, if you're going to do something, do it. We just have a little more technology at hand to aid the process, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well said. Well stated. James.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, following on from what I said before, you know, play is my theme, and fusing it into my life. I mean, I know when I was teaching, that was a wonderful opportunity to, because kids, you know, kids don't play along to be polite. So it was a good opportunity to kind of work with the vital force in terms of setting up atmospheres, and also it was a good opportunity to put that stuff into finger rituals to immediately create that, or to spend time before class creating certain atmospheres. So for me, yeah, I used it in those circumstances. I also I got this a little bit from what was it, the old William Walker Atkinson books of being a center of power, and with that, along with the Bardon finger rituals, I would build up the huge amount of vital force along with this ideation of being a center of power. Basically, you're the center point of the universe, because the universe is infinite and the point is kind of within the universe is infinitely big or infinitely small. So that dynamic idea of being the center of power, charged with as many breaths as I could fit in of the vital force connected to a mudra, would be something, you know, I would use in an interview or a meeting, where I needed that extra oomph to be dynamic, to be confident, to be everything people needed me to be. So I would do that, and I would probably hold that posture with my hand in my pocket, or, you know, on my lap subtly during that meeting as well. So this was all great experimentation, because you could very much see the difference between the state of being when I do that and when I don't do that. So yeah, so it's all just testing and playing for me, how I bring it into my life.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And, you know, obviously there's things in our lives that are very familiar, and, you know, we do these things every day. And then when we bring in practice, we can see how those things that we are super familiar with change. And so we can use, I think I found anyway, personally, that it makes for a good gauge. Like you said, even James, you know, like, you know, and changing the atmosphere of a situation. You know, when you see people's body postures and language and that just suddenly relax, as an example, and, you know, or whatever, you know, I think these familiar things act as good reference points. So yeah, wonderful response. Now, Victoria, would you like to jump in on this?
Yeah, how are you able to infuse practice into your existing life? Well, first, I think by being a practitioner itself, you are infusing practice into your life, because it becomes part of your lifestyle. It becomes part of your routine, part of your habit, as you as we covered in the prior question. But one thing I wanted to mention is, on one level, I approach my practice as it fades into the background and it becomes part of the mainframe. So whenever a situation comes up where I need my traits, my skills, my abilities gained from practice, those things become activated and can turn on. So you can, you know, do a deliberate act like charging water or food, or cleansing yourself in a shower. But also you can have your skill sets and abilities just in your back pocket, and they're kind of on silent, like your phone is on silent. But if there's something that happens that pings, it needs to come up, it will need to come up. So for example, like reading Akasha or transfer of consciousness. say you're in a dynamic dealing with another person. Like in my day job, I deal with high level stress legal stuff for multi-billion-dollar corporations. So there's dynamics there with, you know, personalities and cultures, and a lot of interpersonal relationships that have to be navigated. So understanding where people are coming from, or the energy that they are using, and kind of what their own astral worlds are. You know, it allows you to have more insight and then manage yourself on how to then manage those relationships. And that I want to mention the elemental equilibrium exercise, because even just doing that, which is a practice in and of itself, it then reverberates out into your existing life. So as you practice, you know, our soul mirrors, you balance them, but as you practice and as life happens, things might kind of ping one way or another, and we sometimes get out of balance. At least that's my personal experience. But when you return to balancing your elements again, that will have a natural bleed out effect and also impact everything in your life. I noticed the first time I sincerely established elemental equilibrium, a lot of my karma got reset. And a lot of the things I had to deal with no longer became an issue once I met that threshold of elemental equilibrium. But as Bob said, you can get creative too. You know, you can do rituals around your home to charge the space with different signatures. You can make each room be a different energy. You can, if you're kind of a universalist like me, you can program different energies of different pantheons in different rooms if you want. You can, if you're sitting at a cafe and you see people having an argument, you can project like calming, understanding energy if you want. So there's really a lot of options available. And as Bob said, it's just about your creativity and seeing in any given situation, there's something that you can apply because you're already present to whatever's happening. But if you want to use any of these tools you have in your toolkit, you can.
Yeah, wonderful. And I have to say, just as a general byproduct of practice, is that you know, my personal situational awareness in any given situation is greatly enhanced. And so there's so many wonderful boons to explore. And I'm not sure who mentioned it, but essentially exploring the depth of the exercises rather than like you at the beginning, you might see one and you want to get to 10 type of thing. But I think it might have been James mentioned that, you know, there's these new depths and there's new width that opens up for exploration that adds new levels of interest because we have increased capacities for perception and that too. Now, I'm just going to say that I do have a name marking system here, and I think I just want to make sure that I got everyone on this question. Philip, did you comment on this?
No, I was thinking of something that might be a little different though, although that doesn't mean that, I mean, I agree with the general thrust of what people have been saying about how you can use various exercises and apply them as you go through your day. But because most of my life has been with that kind of thing to do with ritual magic, there's been an emphasis on setting aside a work area, a ritual area, and having much more fantastical things occurring in that environment compared to the daily mundane, if you like, environment. And it's very necessary to have a demarcation between all the world views and things you see and experience in a ritual environment and the things that you do in you know, driving your car or making sure you've got the right money to pay for the coffee or you know, like interacting with work at work and things like that. But when you and the ritual work impacts usually indirectly your mundane world, the things that you do in ritual and how you progress in, and it's almost like you've got a double life And I think that is something you can do with Bardon's work, but it isn't. It's perhaps not prevalent. It's more of a specific thing. You do literally go, you come home, you chill out for half an hour, you don't eat, and then you do some kind of ritual that you've been working on for a few months. It's gradually gaining momentum. You've even booked some holiday so that you'll have a few days off, so you can do it 5 times a day. In this case, that was with my wife, for example, and there's a crescendo within that, and that then impacts indirectly the world, unless you specifically want it to have an outcome in the mundane world. And that's kind of it's not in conflict with what you guys have been saying, but it is a different deal, if you see what I mean. So there's certainly doing a lot of Bardon stuff in the normal run-of-the-mill existence is rather fun, actually. But as someone who's been more involved in ritual magic than perhaps some Bardon practitioners, there's also this setting aside and getting very, very intensive in often a different way, and how that has to be kept separate, because your worldview in that place is not the same as the worldview in normal life. And if you had them both together, people would probably think that you were mad, or you were having some kind of a psychotic break, because your terms of reference are completely different. So there is that side of things as well. But that, like I say, that does not necessarily, it does not follow that there's an antithesis. It's just a you set aside a time and a space, and that is also an important, for me, it's certainly something where Bardon's techniques are also to be found. So there's a slightly different view, slightly different approach, but not conflicting, because obviously Bardon stuff does very well in just as you go through your day. That it does very well indeed. Yeah.
Well, wonderful commentary, and yeah, that's actually a really great thing to talk about. Is that, obviously you could almost say that there's these kind of just loosely 2 approaches, which is where you're there's an alchemy of interaction with the everyday world, and then there's this time that we steal ourselves away for these, like you said, intensive processes to essentially reinforce and really deepen our well, essentially you're removing the noise, like you're setting aside, you're creating a sacred space, you're moving from the mundane into the sacred, and there's time to explore the world and how these practices interact with the world. But yeah, absolutely. And I just want to actually just put this out to anyone in the panel here who would like to just comment or that on what Philip has said about, like the demarcation of allocated time, and as opposed to, say, just sort of playing in the world, and the value and importance of that. Victoria.
Yeah, I'll add to this, because as I was thinking about this live and some of our questions, a lot of my persona in the world is very muggle, very simple, forward facing. I have a very simple, basic life, but then we have, and I think a lot of magicians are like this, you don't have the luxury to be a public magician to the world, for various reasons, whether it's the law of silence, or, you have people in your life, you may not want to know that, or a career. But I feel like part of that is also learning to just carry the magic with you, even if you aren't doing a ritual or, integrating Bardon practices in your day-to-day. So I mentioned previously having it in the back kind of framework, the hard drive, so you can operate magically on a very subtle level, because this is going a little bit left field, because also the more, depending on the kind of energy you work with, the more energy you charge and bring into a space, the easier it is to, catch the attention of things, especially, in my younger training days, I used to carry around a lot of power, kind of power that was part of an egregore I was in. But that also caused a lot of things to kind of come into my field of influence, because things see that, they smell it, they get attracted to it, you know, so things start kind of like putting their fingers into different places. So if you can also operate from the background and the mainframe and let your magic unfold on a very subtle level, I kind of like that covert form of doing magic as well. You know, you can understand there's different planes of reality. That might be more kind of Akashic based approach to doing magic. But when you've already done your work, you have your work. You know, I was once taught, if you can do something once, you can do it again, because you already have that moment and experience that is in Akasha. So as long as you have faith, it is always accessible. So all your experiences, your abilities, you can put into your Akashic field. And whether you are pulling it out every day or once a year or every 10 years, you know, you have that with you. You know, for example, Bardon was in being in the concentration camp. So, you know, you can use Kabbalah letters and mudras and magic to affect change. But also, not saying we're in a society at this time where that's something we're facing, but as a magician, you can also do your work on a very subtle, quiet, undetected level. And that is just as efficient, and you are still abiding with your practice from that perspective too.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Would anyone else like to comment?
I don't know, Victoria, you're giving away all the secrets here.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing is that, you know, being able to mentally transfer into previous experiences that we generate for ourselves. And, you know, I've got notable experiences in my life that I can go back to. So once it's in the field, you can tap back in, it's locked in there. And I think that's one of the valuable skills.